Hey everyone, thanks for coming to our session, Deploying and Managing Enterprise Apps. I'm John Vinsel, I'm a program manager at Microsoft. Been with Microsoft a couple years, spent my career mostly through enterprise, focusing on manageability, and the past year focusing on managing Windows apps.
My name is Cliff Strom. I'll be doing kind of the second half of the presentation. Program manager at Microsoft. I've been spending the last couple releases working on enterprise features. So I'm going to sit over here until I'm ready.
Okay, so we spent the past couple days talking a lot about changes that we've done to apps. We talked a little bit about the Universal app in the keynote today. As we talk through this session today, we're going to talk about the workflow for deploying and managing enterprise apps. And what you'll kind of notice along this presentation is the workflow and a lot of the concepts are the same across Windows and Windows Phone, but there's going to be some very different technical steps that you need to take. So we're going to take it at a high level, giving you guys the complete overview of what's going on, and then go through some of the details of what you'll actually need to do when you're managing and deploying within your enterprises. Okay, so as we look through the main workflow, there's about 4 key steps that we kind of see. The first one is really building and testing your apps. This is writing your code, debugging your code, just kind of going through that. A ton of sessions this week, really dedicated to helping you guys learn all the different things that you can do in building and testing your apps. The next thing that you'll need to go and consider is what you need to do to ready your apps for deployment, or just ready your enterprise for deployment. There's things that you'll need to do to your app and to your clients to get ready to deploy in the enterprise, kind of like you'd need to do when you're deploying to consumer devices and you're uploading to the store. Then there's actually deploying your apps. So a couple different ways across the 2 different device types to deploy your apps in the enterprise. And then lastly, once the app's deployed, there's steps that you'll need to take to do ongoing management and updating of your applications. So the first thing I want to talk about here is notification services for line of business apps. This is something that you can now do in your enterprise for both Windows and Windows Phone. We just introduced the ability to do this for line of business apps and Windows apps with Windows 8.1 update. So if you have an enterprise app, you can actually go and register it with the store and then start using notification services within your applications. So you can create a real delightful user experience, engage your users more, and leverage our WNS services. There was actually a great talk yesterday that my peer Thomas Fennell did that tells you how you can actually code with notification services. Likewise, if you're developing for Windows Phone and you're using the Zap format, you can use the old Microsoft push notifications, or you can actually leverage WNS and Windows Phone and Windows Phone 8.1 for those services. One thing you will note, if you're using the new Apex format for your Windows Phone apps, those won't currently work with the WNS infrastructure, and that's due to some of the things that the signing does to the app. So if you're signing any of your apps with the Semantic Mobile Cert, you won't be able to leverage WNS. Okay, so you guys are spending a bunch of time learning about how to build your apps, and hopefully those will all be nicely tested. The next thing that you'll need to consider when you're looking to deploy in your enterprise is what you need to do to ready your apps for deployment. Like I said, when you're building for the consumer space, you can go and upload to the store. So we help you with like the ingestion of the app and running some kits against it and really helping understand the quality of the app. When you're within an enterprise, the ownership is really upon you guys to do that. Now, with that ownership, you also get a little bit more flexibility. If you saw in the keynote, we talked about with the Windows apps that you can actually do desktop communication with the apps. That's the flexibility that we give you because the app is trusted within your enterprise and not being deployed to the broad mass. Likewise, if you're developing for Windows Phone, there's a restricted set of APIs that when you upload to the store, we won't let you submit that app. We're a little bit more flexible when you're controlling or deploying within your own enterprise, so you can actually go and leverage those APIs for your own line of business apps. So it's important to make sure that you test and do all the validation yourself. Now, we do offer some kits, the same kits that we use on the store backend. There's the WAC on the Windows side, which is the Windows App Compatibility Kit, and then there's the Marketplace Test Kit, or the MPTK. Those are both available to download and run against your apps, and that'll actually tell you things like performance and some error handling stuff. So you can run those kits against your apps, get those results, and understand like the quality of your app before you go and deploy. Just understand if you're using any of those restricted code paths, that you may get some errors, and those are just things to kind of consider. Okay, once you've kind of got your app developed and tested and ready to go, The next thing you need to do is get your clients ready for deployment. There's a few different ways that we can go and set up our clients for deploying apps. One of the common things that you'll see across Windows and Windows Phone is we actually have a built-in management agent. With Windows Phone 8 and Windows Phone 8.1, and introduced with Windows 8.1, we have a built-in MDM agent. It uses common protocols that any third-party mobile management device provider like AirWatch, Intune, or MobileIron can build upon, or pretty much any third party that wants to. So you can go and enroll your users on those devices, use the ability of these management services, and actually do the things that you'll need to do to configure your device. The common things you'll need to do to configure your device is set up certificates. On Windows, you'll have to enable a side loading key. And then you might want to go and push some policies above and beyond that. We're going to go into the details of all the specific steps you need to do on each platform in a couple of slides. Okay. And then once your apps are ready for deployment, you'll actually be able to deploy in your enterprise. Now, what's important to note is line of business apps have a different flow in deployment than Windows Store apps. If you look at the diagram here, you'll see your devices are in the center. If you're actually installing apps from the store, or maybe you're updating some of your inbox apps in Windows, all the apps are distributed and come directly from the store. So even if you want to use apps that are published to the store in your enterprise, they still actually have to come through the store channel. Then any apps you build, you own the ingestion of and the deployment of. So in this picture here, you can see on the right side that we have a management server in place. So we go and we upload our apps into the management server. We build a company portal. A lot of the third-party MDMs will provide a company portal for you, or Cliff will talk a little bit about how we can build one of those. And then you can deploy the apps directly to your users. Both platforms now support push and pull of apps. So if you want to just distribute an app to a user silently, those apps can be pushed out. Or likewise, you can just make those apps available to users and let them acquire them on their own. So I wanted to take a moment here and actually demo deployment in action. And I went to my friends over on the Windows Intune team, and I got a setup of one of their soon-to-come releases of supporting Windows Phone 8. So I'm going to transition over here to an Intune console. Okay. And what we actually have set up here is we have System Center Configuration Manager, which is a common enterprise management product. And this is actually interacting with Windows Intune. So I have a server console here that's directly hooked up to Intune, and then I'll have two clients enrolled into Windows Intune. So one of the things we have here is an app. So while we're in this transition, as we're trying to converge to common apps and app models, you're going to have potentially different apps for all your different operating systems. What we can do with something like System Center or Windows Intune is we can actually build a common app. What this allows us to do is go into the app and assign different technology types to that application. So in my screen here, you can see down here, in my Build 2014 app, I actually have multiple different technologies. I have a Windows app package. Oops. A Windows Phone app package, and then I have a ZAP file, so for my down-level Windows Phone 8 clients. I've gone ahead and I've actually targeted this to a couple of devices that I had pre-enrolled. If I go in here into my Windows Phone, I can go into my company portal. Oops. And I can see a list of apps that are advertised to me. Likewise, using that same deployment, I can go to my Windows client here, go into my company portal, and see a, oh, nice. And see a similar set of applications available to me. This allows us to kind of aggregate those different technology types out and make the deployment experience a little bit easier for you. And then from here, I can just go and install my application. And with the portal here, it'll actually leverage some Toast notifications, and I'll be able to see the progress as a user. Now, I mentioned the built-in management agent functionality is new to Windows 8.1. It's built into our UI, and it's super easy to set up. So for anyone that's not familiar with it, if you're using a third-party management server, you can just go into Network here and Workplace, and then simply just go ahead and join. The join experience is pretty simple, where you just click join and you enter your username and password, and it'll go and authenticate to the system. Generally, when you set up the system on the back end, it'll have a little bit of alias redirection to help guide your usernames to the devices. Likewise, you can set the same thing up from the settings panel in Windows Phone. Okay, that was a quick demo on deploying using Windows Intune and using our common MDM agent. So once you have your apps deployed in your enterprise, you might want to go and kind of control and restrict some of the functionality of apps. We have a couple different controls available built in box to help you with managing the way some of your apps work in the environment. A couple of the easy controls to use are managing access to the store. So you might not want your users to go to the consumer store, so you can go and actually disable the access to the store. Likewise, you can go and control the way Internet Explorer works with a series of different settings for disabling IE as a whole or controlling some of the settings around Internet Explorer. One of the other things we do have, especially if you're allowing people with access to the store to maybe get things like a Dynamics app, a Skype, or a Lync app from our store, is we have the ability to manage the apps that can be launched. With Windows Phone, we call it an allow and deny list, where you can actually go and author a list of apps that are specifically able to launch, or maybe some specific apps like Flappy Bird that you don't want to launch. You can go and deny that. Also, from the Windows platform side, with Windows Enterprise Edition, we have a feature called App Locker that allows you to do that same functionality. So while you might want to have access to the store because there are some useful apps for productivity out there, you can control the apps that are non-productive to your users and block them, or just do an explicit allow for those types of applications. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the specifics to Windows Client. So we went through at a high level and just kind of laid out the workflow that we need to do. And now there's going to be some technical differences on how each one of these types of things works. So we talked a little bit about this in the keynote. My friend Harry did a pretty cool demo, I thought, where we talked about the ability to interact with the desktop. So we got a lot of feedback from you guys that there's a lot of reusable code that you want to use. And there's going to be a time where, as you move to modern apps and you want a new experience, you might want to leverage that existing code. So if you're running Windows 8.1 update, you can now write your codes to interact with the desktop. There's two key ways that you can do this. You can work through the local host, or you can write a WinRT brokered component. The brokered component will allow you a more two-way communication and a little bit more, some more advanced feature functionality for the way your app communicates. Likewise, you can just do a more one-way communication through the local service. Harry did a session yesterday where he actually deep dives in ways to reuse your code within an enterprise, and that session's available for download if you guys didn't get a chance to see that. Okay. When we look at the Windows side and we're looking at writing and deploying our clients, there's a few key things that we need to do. Any of our line of business apps will have to sign with a certificate. We need to make sure that certificate is in the trusted root store, or the root of that certificate's in the trusted root store of the Windows client. Like I said, a lot of the management tools will do that for you. Likewise, you can just go and use GP or script that to get that in there. But it has to match, otherwise the apps won't work. Next, the device needs to be enabled for sideloading. If anyone's not familiar with sideloading on Windows, you generally have to enable a 25-digit key, or for Windows Enterprise Edition, have the device domain joined, and then add a group policy in place. So there's a couple different ways to set that up. We did make some changes in Windows 8.1 update to make sideloading a little easier. So we heard there was a lot of frustration on just getting sideloading working and the things that you needed to do. So starting with Windows 8.1 update, we're actually moving to a more flexible key distribution model. In December, we changed the overall key pack sizes that you'd purchase to, from 100 to 10. Likewise, if you're a volume license select customer, I believe there's some new pricing coming out in May that's going to make that even easier to acquire keys. Something along the lines of about $100 will get you a bulk amount of keys instead of the previous way where we charge in the 10 packs. We also extended the domain join functionality across any device that's domain join enabled. So if you're running Windows Pro and you domain join it, you'll no longer need a sideloading key. So we're trying to make it easier for those enterprise and business scenarios to just enable the boxes to install line of business apps and not try to put a bunch of hurdles in your way. Also, if anyone's using an embedded SKU, with Windows 8.1 update, the embedded SKU will automatically be enabled for sideloading, and you'll just need to push the group policy or set the equivalent registry key, and you can go ahead and install line of business apps. Okay. When I showed you the demo, I showed us hooked up to Intune. We were using the built-in MDM agent to deploy. So that's a really easy way to get apps in your enterprise. Now, not everyone will want to go ahead and use an MDM. Maybe you guys are running a smaller shop. Maybe it's just an isolated business unit that doesn't hook up to a management infrastructure. So we do offer built-in commands in Windows to make deployment easy. All our commands are PowerShell enabled. We allow you to go and install apps per user. You can also install the app for the device so that all users log on, get the app at their next login. Which allows you to go and put those apps into your image. So maybe you guys are going to have an expense app or an HR app, and you maybe you're building a custom Windows image. You can actually go and put that app into your image, and then all your users will automatically have that app on their first logon. And then again, I mentioned earlier in the slides that we have the built-in management capabilities. In this, one key thing to point out is it's not available in Windows 8. It was new to Windows 8.1, but is available in all versions. So if you're running Pro, Enterprise, embedded, the functionality is in box for you. Okay. I talked about in the previous slide the diagram that store apps come from the store and your line of business apps come from your management server. I'm going to actually contradict myself a little bit here and talk about some work we did to help you guys that are just running Windows in your enterprise. When you get a Windows image, you get a series of 14 or 17 pre-installed apps in it. These are things like your mail client, calendar, Bing, and things like that. We actually know and got feedback from enterprises that these are super valuable things that ship as part of Windows, and they want to use them. But you want to go ahead and disable the store. The problem we're seeing is we actually want to go and update our service backends, or there's changes to functionality in these apps, and there's no channel for you as an enterprise customer to get these applications. So we've worked within Microsoft and within our Windows team to offer an alternate channel to now allow updates to come out for these pre-installed apps. So we're going to start here shortly, and we're going to produce a one-time update for all our Windows 8 pre-installed apps because there's been a lot of app updates. And we're going to release a series of MSIs and some WSUS updates. So if you're running WSUS in your enterprise, you should automatically get the sync to your WSUS channel when we release these. And you can go and actually scan against your devices, and without the store being enabled on your device, patch all the apps that ship as part of the Windows image. Again, this is limited to the stuff that we ship in the Windows image, and it won't be an alternate channel for full store distribution, but it's enough for the things that you want to use, like the mail app, to keep using that in your enterprise and feel secure that you're getting the latest and greatest updates. And this will be available for both Windows 8 and Windows 8.1. So the updates will be coming for both OSs. So if you've deployed Windows 8, you'll also be looking for some updates coming here shortly. Okay, I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of good productivity tools within the store. And while you might want to disable the store, again, to prevent like consumer apps like Angry Birds or Flappy Birds from being deployed to your systems, there's a lot of good things like Dynamics, Lync, Skype, Adobe Reader that you'll want to use. As we've been working with a lot of our partner teams, that we know that they want to publish through the store, but it's for apps that require on-premise infrastructure. So a great example here is you might be a Dynamics customer, and you guys have actually spent some time investing in some infrastructure. Now, the Dynamics guys want to actually push an app through the store. With the web parts of our apps, they actually require you to go and declare all the URIs in the app. So anyone who's publishing an app to the store needs to declare all the URIs, which they won't know for your on-premise applications. So in Windows 8.1, we added this new feature. For any app that comes from the store that's using an enterprise auth capability, you can go and extend that URI path. So say you're using the Dynamics app and you're contoso.com, you can go and set a group policy in your environment, and it'll add contoso.com to the trusted URIs list. So now when you're using that app, you can direct it to your on-premise infrastructure and leverage a quality store app for your on-prem needs. And the last thing I want to talk about here is Enterprise Mode Internet Explorer. This one got a lot of coverage in the keynote, and it's a great feature. We know as you guys are moving forward to the new platform, one of the big concerns is some web compatibility. We introduced the functionality to not just do dock mode for Internet Explorer, but to actually run all the old components on the browser. So if you guys have invested a lot in Internet Explorer 8, and you notice that it really wasn't working as you moved to Internet Explorer 11, you can go and either manually configure or actually use group policy and push down a list of sites within your enterprise to go and do IE8 mode. And again, this is far more than a dock mode. A dock mode would get us like maybe 80 to 90% compatibility. We're seeing some of our large customers with up to like 99, 100% compatibility with all their custom code that they've written. I have in the related slides at the end another session that we have here dedicated to the work that we did on this feature. So it's a great session to catch if you guys are doing a lot of web app development. So I'm going to hand over to Cliff here, and he's going to talk about some of the differences in Windows Phone.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. It was a lot of great information. So again, my name's Cliff Strom. I was a program manager on Windows Phone 8 that was responsible for the enterprise app deployment feature, and I stayed involved in all the features that were added to Windows Phone 8.1. So as John mentioned, from a conceptual level, deploying enterprise applications on Windows and Windows Phone are very similar. And then immediately as you get off of that conceptual aspect, things start to diverge. We're hoping that in a build event sometime in our future, that we can relay to you all the wonderful convergence that's happened in the two, having a single model and whatnot, but we're definitely not there yet. So I'm going to explain some of the Windows Phone features for enterprise app deployment. And hopefully that'll allow you to build some line of business apps either for your company or maybe to license them to another company. Let's get started. So the first part of the process is to acquire a certificate. We have one root of trust for the enterprise app deployment feature on Windows Phone. That's Symantec. But the process first starts with getting a Dev Center account. And you must get a company account. Individual accounts, as well as student accounts and other types of accounts, will not be able to participate for enterprise app deployment. It has to be a company account. The publisher name that you use to sign up with is important insofar as it's used in some UI components, some dialogues that are shown to the user. So you need to make sure it reflects accurately what you want to present to your employees or the phones that you're going to be deploying these apps to. Once you have the account, you can go to Symantec and use what we call the Symantec ID on the Dev Center account. This is a back-end piece of unique information that is shared between the back-ends that allows it to associate accounts, as well as it's used kind of throughout the enterprise app deployment system on the phone to uniquely identify a given company. The contact information is used to kind of run through the certificate, and it does require more than that. The approver that you signed up for when signing up for the Dev Center account is contacted as part of the cert process so that the corporate approver has all the information they need to know who's getting a cert that's representing their company. All this, the Symantec web wizard needs to be run on a single PC so that the private key, the certificate request, and the certificate all come together in one location so they can be used. After they've been done on one PC, you can export that to a file and import it to any other PC that your company sees fit for running the other aspects. The certificate itself is $299 a year and does expire after 1 year, so it needs to be renewed, and some of these processes need to be repeated, and I'll point that out as we get to it. So now we have a certificate. We're going to put that aside for a second as I talk about the kind of enrollments that you can do. And by enrollment, I specifically mean setting up a phone to have some kind of relationship with an enterprise and be able for an enterprise to be able to deploy applications to that specific phone. Only phones that are enrolled in a given enterprise can install and launch applications signed by that enterprise. So we basically break it down into two different types of enrollments. First is managed. The managed enrollment is characterized by having a relationship with a device management server. The entry point for that is a workplace settings application. It was called the Company Apps Settings app in Windows Phone 8, and they renamed it to be the Workplace Settings app. You go in there, you enter your credentials, it'll hook up to the MDM server, and it can push down applications and push down policies as well. There can only be one of those on a phone at a time, so there's no conflicting policies between different managed enrollments. Apps are installed and can be inventoried via the MDM server or via Company Hub, which I'll discuss in a few slides. Apps can be pushed to the device via the device management server. Apps can also be uninstalled. Those are kind of new features to Windows Phone 8.1, insofar as we prevented arbitrary numbers of applications from being pushed to the phone in Windows Phone 8, kind of limited just to one during the enrollment process. We've opened that up to allow any number of apps to be pushed from the device management server. Also, we only allowed unenroll in Windows Phone 8, but we've moved it to allow individual app uninstall from the server. Apps can also be silently updated from the server. When you want to unenroll from an application, a managed enrollment, you can do that locally by going back to the Workplace Settings app, and there's a delete icon. You can just go ahead and unenroll from the MDM server. The MDM can also remotely unenroll phones that are no longer part of the enterprise or for whatever reason need to be remotely unenrolled. When you do unenroll an enterprise, all the associated applications, all the enterprise apps signed by that enterprise are uninstalled automatically, trying to purge the phone of all the enterprise's specific information. The other kind of enrollment we have is unmanaged. So there's no MDM server involved here. You can email, you can send an email attachment, or you can update or enroll via the browser. There's no limit to the number of unmanaged enrollments you can have, but there's also no policy. There's no server interaction, so there's no way to push apps to the phone, uninstall apps, et cetera. You can install apps and do inventories from a Company Hub, or again, through the same method you used for enrolling via email or browser. We did add a new API, what we call a Company Hub API that I'll talk about in a couple slides, that allows you an application to unenroll from its own enterprise. I'll discuss that a little bit more when I get there. Specifically regarding the managed enterprise management, there's another session that starts in about an hour from now at 2:30. Catherine Holdsworth is going to go through a whole bunch of information dealing specifically with management. That includes VPN service, cert management, whatnot. So that's a really great session to catch if you can. So now we've had the different kinds of enrollment. What's the actual process to enroll? So you take that key that we had, I said, put aside for a while, bring that back now, take that with the Windows Phone SDK, and we're going to create what we call an app enrollment token, or an AET. This is a very simple XML document, contains the publisher ID that represents the enterprise, and has a signature associated with it. Again, it's generated once a year because the cert that signs it expires every year, so you need to generate a new app enrollment token when you get a new certificate, and that can be deployed to phones over an authenticated channel. MDM has a great way of doing this. They can push the new app enrollment token when the phone calls back to the server, but you can also distribute it via email or the browser the same way that it was originally pushed to the phone. Once it gets to the phone, we're going to validate, make it sure it's a valid app enrollment token, including the signature, including that it goes up to the one and only supported Symantec enterprise route, and it can't be expired, obviously. So now we have phones that are enrolled, and we're ready to create applications and deploy applications to that. I got one of those applications that could be deployed is called a Company Hub. There's really no specific form or function that a Company Hub has to do, but it calls a set of APIs that we loosely call the Company Hub APIs that basically allows an application to enumerate apps that are associated with it via the publisher ID. It can launch those applications it enumerates, and it can even install other enterprise applications. And all that was delivered with Windows Phone 8. It's part of the Windows Phone Management Deployment namespace. There's an installation manager interface that allows you to do that. In Windows Phone 8.1, we added some functionality that was more enterprise specific. whereas in Windows Phone 8 it was more app specific. So we added same namespace. There's an enrollment manager that allows you to get, for an app, to get enterprise data associated with its enterprise. You can get things like the company name, the publisher ID that can be useful, or the expiration of the app enrollment token. And if it notices that the app enrollment token is about to expire, it can call a different API to go ahead and renew that app enrollment token. It can also unenroll from the current enterprise. So if the caller is associated with a specific enterprise, it can call an API that says unenroll, and it will unenroll. Now, as I mentioned before, unenrolling from an enterprise uninstalls all the applications associated with that enterprise. So this will be kind of a last call by this application, because it will then be terminated and uninstalled because it was associated with the enterprise. But it can be useful for unenrolling from that unmanaged enterprise. The Company Hub APIs also allow you to trigger a phone home. I'm going to discuss that later on in the deck. Now, I do have to mention that all Company Hubs need to be Silverlight applications, so they can be 8.0 or 8.1 Silverlight apps. Right now, they can't be WinRT applications. The enumeration and launching, that's a long story short, there's interesting when you start converging different implementations from different platforms, and you end up with this kind of bullet on a slide build. So for now, it's obviously a problem we want to rectify in the future, but for now, keep it to be an 8.0 or an 8.1 Silverlight app. There's a great MSDN article by Tony Champion, a Microsoft MVP, that describes how to create a company hub. It was specifically on the Windows Phone 8 functionality, but I think now he'll probably get a lot of requests to add the 8.1 functionality, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. Okay, so that's a company hub. There are a couple other things I need to mention with respect to applications that you're developing, and that's specifically with the publisher value and the manifest. And this isn't unique to enterprise-signed apps, but it's because they're not submitted to the store, things aren't as well orchestrated in this case. So it's something that you'll have to pay attention when you develop your enterprise app. When you're developing a WinRT app, and that's specifically anything that's packaged as an AppX, the publisher value from the manifest, the AppX manifest, needs to match the certificate value, the subject value from the certificate. So let's take as an example a certificate that was issued by Symantec. It has a specific subject value that includes the publisher ID as well as some metadata, some titles of the publisher name. That value has to be represented in the AppX manifest, the identity element, and you can see the publisher value there in blue and red. The specific OID has to be represented that way, and the CN and OU values are encoded to allow use of special characters, like a lot of them contain commas or something like that. This one doesn't actually specify anything, but it's good practice to include the encoding quotes. Now, that was publisher. There's also something to do with publisher ID in the manifest. And specifically, this is used for testing. This is not going to be relevant to when you've final signed your enterprise application and are deploying it to phones. But when you're testing a company hub or even other enterprise apps, you want to make sure that the publisher ID value is such that it can find other related applications. Remember I said when you enumerate applications, you can enumerate apps by publisher ID. So if I'm a company hub and I want to enumerate other apps on the phone, I need to make sure that that publisher ID is the one that I'm trying to find other apps for. And because it can be an 8.0 or an 8.1 Silverlight app, you have the option, you have the possibility of having a WMApp manifest or an AppX manifest that we need to modify. So specifically, we'll take a look at the same certificate I showed you. The top part of the subject is actually the publisher ID, and that's what we need to put into the manifest. It also, little trick, needs to be kind of hex encoded and put into what is basically a null GUID value. So in the AppX, in the WMApp manifest, it goes into the app element, publisher ID, and in the AppX manifest, it goes into the phone identity element. And so this is just a useful guide. Take that value. Obviously, your specific enterprise certificate will have a different publisher ID, so the hex representation will be different. But this will allow, when you're testing your company apps, it'll find both the other test enterprise apps that are also debug deployed, as well as those apps that have been installed kind of in final signed. Again, when we install a final signed company application, we'll go ahead and take the value from the cert and overwrite whatever's in the manifest. So you don't have to worry about that part. But so this is only useful when testing. OK, so now I have apps all ready and any kind of caveats in the last couple slides. They're all fixed up. Now I can go and deploy them to phones that have already been enrolled in that specific enterprise. So I take that same key that we tucked away, take the same Windows Phone SDK, and take an unsigned application. Windows Phone 8 supported only the Zap packages, the Silverlight apps. In Windows Phone 8.1, we've added the ability to create AppX applications and sign those with company certs. Not company hubs, but other kind of applications. Take that, and the tools themselves know all about the packaging format, and they fix up the package with all the signatures on the binaries inside and the package itself just as it needs to be when they're installed. Those applications are pushed to the phone, again, over an authenticated channel. It's likely the same one that you used for enrollment. An MDM could be from a company hub, or it could be over email or a browser. When it gets to the phone, as I mentioned before, the phone has to be enrolled in that specific enterprise in order to get apps from the enterprise as well. So there needs to be an associated AAT. The app itself has to be signed properly, as all app deployments are. And one thing, the enterprise signed applications by default only allow third-party security capabilities. So you can't go and use a second-party or first-party capability. And that'll be checked during app install. So now I have phones that are enrolled and apps that are deployed to them. Users are going to want to launch them. Let's hope. Then take a user. It can be from any entry point, the shell start menu. It could be the apps list, or it could be from a company hub that enumerated the application and is going to launch it. The phone OS realizes this is an enterprise app. It can find the publisher ID that is associated with it, and now it has to do a check to make sure that you're properly enrolled in that enterprise in order to continue with the app install. So the AAT must be present, and it has to be valid. It can't be expired, can't be revoked from the phone home server, and it can't be disabled from device management. If all that goes through, the app goes ahead and launches, and the employee can obviously use the application for whatever purpose it provides. Now, I've mentioned the phone home several times, so I wanted to explain what that was. So with enterprise app deployment, we've given the ability to kind of circumvent the Windows Phone store. So we want to maintain the integrity of the ecosystem. So we've put this in here to have some ability, whereas the store allows you to do certification, and it allows you to do some checks on the binary, on the application, as well as it allows you to revoke apps that are improperly used. A similar type of service as the phone home provides a similar functionality. So any phone that's enrolled in at least one enterprise will periodically send to a Microsoft service its device ID, its unique device ID, publisher IDs, which represent the various enterprises that are enrolled on the system, and a list of enterprise app IDs that are associated for each enterprise. There's no specific information about an app. It's not even a title. Everything's very abstract. In return, the service sends a list of statuses for each of those enterprises that were on the phone said it had available. And if the status basically comes back as good or bad right now, and if one of them comes back as bad or invalid, the enterprise is basically shut down on that phone. That particular enterprise is shut down. So if an enterprise comes back as revoked, apps that have been installed won't launch anymore, and you can't install any new apps from that enterprise. Other enterprises that report back as good are unaffected and don't have any side effects. The phone home itself is once per day, scheduled by the system to be once per day. Plus, each time you enroll in a new enterprise, it'll go ahead and phone home to check the status. As I mentioned before, the company hub APIs also allow applications to trigger this if there's a need. So because it's important to our ecosystem to have this functionality, after a certain number of failures, we will go ahead and block the install of other enterprise applications on the phone until such time as it can connect back to the service and check on those statuses. We want to maintain a level of integrity in the ecosystem, and this kind of shutdown allows that to happen. Any apps that are already installed on the system will continue to run. So if someone's on a prolonged vacation or for whatever reason doesn't have internet connectivity, those apps that are already installed will continue to run. It only affects the installation of new enterprise applications. Okay, so that was kind of a walkthrough of everything, at a high level, of everything you need for deploying apps, enterprise applications to Windows Phone. As you saw, conceptually they're very similar in terms, but there's quite a few differences between the Windows and Windows Phone model. So we've got a lot of work to do as far as unifying those. And so looking forward, our number one priority, one of our number one priorities, I should say, is that we want to converge on a single model. Whether you're a Windows desktop, a Windows tablet, or a Windows Phone, all of them should be the exact same model when you're deploying enterprise applications. From the certificates that are used to sign or participate in the ecosystem, to enrollment, to the device management protocol, how it uses WNS, and the list goes on and on. There shouldn't be any differences, and that's one of our goals, and we hope to come back to you in future build to report back on the convergence being 100%, or very close to it. Some other features that are high on our interest list is management of store applications. Right now, we allow you to do a whole lot of management with enterprise apps, but there's no lifecycle management for store applications, and sometimes IT wants to control those as far as whether a phone is within certification or compliance. So we want to do that. We're continuously looking for better ways to isolate an enterprise's data to make sure that an enterprise knows that its data is secure on Windows platforms. There shouldn't be a way for other enterprises, other personal data to get intermingled, and so we're going to look at better ways of trying to tease those apart and keep them separate, such that when an enterprise is on the phone, only that enterprise has access to the data, and when an enterprise leaves the phone through an unenrollment, all that data goes away. It's inaccessible. We also continuously want to look for more supporting different types of customer scenarios, and specifically we're looking for supporting more secure environments that may not have access to the internet for that phone home, for example. That's been an issue from some isolated environments, and more regulated environments, government and whatnot, as well as allowing enterprises to use the certificates that they want to use to participate in this system. And finally, my last item on this list is allowing us to push more policies, more settings to applications. And that can be done either from a device management server or potentially from an application that runs local on the client device. So here's kind of a high-level view. Obviously, we're not going to tell you when or if these will actually ship, but these are kind of higher on our priority list as far as investigations. If you don't see a feature that you're looking for on this list, come up and let us know, because not now. We were very interested in getting feedback on the feature list. This obviously isn't everything that we have that we're tracking right now, but we want to make sure that we're building features that you can consume. There are several related sessions. We've mentioned a few of them in here earlier on in the presentation. There's Catherine Holdsworth is doing a session on enterprise management. It's at 2:30, so it's your next block of sessions. I think it might be in room 2001. I'm not positive on that one. There was a session yesterday that was given, so you can view that if you didn't get a chance to see it. You can view it from Channel 9. There's a couple sessions tomorrow on the AppCompat enterprise mode, as well as some packaging and deployment that is useful for all types of scenarios, not just enterprise scenarios. Finally, there's some more information. We can go to get more details on both the Windows and Windows Phone resources. Just some entry points to some of these with short links. You can either take a picture now to have the link, or you can get the deck from Channel 9 later on. Snap, snap, snap. Okay, and finally, as you've been to multiple sessions, so you know this slide is on everyone's session, feedback is really important to us, both in the content that we deliver to you and the way that we deliver content. So feel free to snap the QR code here and leave us feedback. John and I will look at all feedback that's in the dialog box at the bottom. Go ahead and fill in any kind of comments. It could be related to the information that we've given you or the way we present it, or features that you saw that you want. You can also come up and talk to us on those. We've got cards or Twitter handles. So with that, we'll wrap up. We can field a few questions. And thank you, and enjoy the rest of your stay at Build. All right, any questions? Yes, sir.
Hi. Thanks for the talk, first of all. What's the best mechanism or the recommended mechanism for updating side-loaded apps on machines that are not on a domain? So for instance, a line of business app that was installed via PowerShell with a side-loading key or part of a Windows image. That's something that my company's been struggling with. We deal with customers that are not domain joined, but we want to push updates to their application.
So pushing updates to apps on Windows?
Yes, it's a Windows Store app, not a Windows Phone app.
So line of business apps, the best way to a non-domain joined device, the best way would be to use an MDM service. Because MDM services scale across domain, non-domain joined, they just use that inbox management agent. The next step is really, you could write your own custom service that can call into a server, which would do the same type of thing, or just having like shares available for people to go and update. The workgroup scenario gets a little bit harder because depending on how you set up that workgroup scenario, there's no hooks to do automation. If it's like truly like, just a notebook that's there, there's no way to kind of call into it and tell it to wake up and go do something. But like an MDM, whether it's Intune or any other one, again, it uses that inbox protocol. It uses your credentials, but doesn't force a domain join. Okay. So you get a lot of that rich functionality. That's one of the big reasons that we pulled it forward into Windows 8.1, was we knew that people were moving in certain situations away from domain join for everything, but still wanted those richer capabilities.
Okay, and the machine just has to be internet connected and then...
Depending on the MDM provider, I believe there are some that do on-prem, and then there's like things like Intune that are cloud. The cloud gives you a lot more reach, but just depending on the connectivity that the MDM itself provides.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
We'll do this one over here.
During the talk, you mentioned that the convergence is not 100% complete.
Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
During the talk, you mentioned convergence is not 100% complete between phone and store. What can you tell us what approximately the percentage it's done right now between the APIs?
So I only heard part of the question, but it was about convergence and between the two platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, that's one of our high priority features to allow one model across all of the platforms that we support. Again, it's probably our highest priority feature is to unify on that model so that it simplifies everyone's life. Ours included, but it's not the most important. And it makes everyone's life better on outside of us, such that they can present one front.
Right. Don't mean to press you, but do you have an approximate percentage that's complete in that process?
Yeah, I don't think there's no specific time frame we would have, but
Thank you.
sorry. Yes.
Hi, I'm just wondering what improvements, if any, there are in automation from getting your packaged application, your AppX, or your Windows Phone application, your ZAP file, from Visual Studio automatically deployed to SCCM so that you can publish these line of business apps internally. Right now I see there's a gap between this packaged app, this compiled application you have, and actually getting that in your internal store, quote unquote, which would be SCCM. Are there any improvements from Visual Studio or from your team or from SCCM that would allow that to be a little bit easier? Right now we can publish directly to websites, but
Yeah, so
with Visual Studio right now we have a compiled AppX that we have all of these custom processes to now get it into SCCM and get it packaged, get the metadata, and then get it updated.
So from, and I'm just going to repeat your question the other way to make sure I understand it. Is there a way from compile to deployment to make it a more seamless automation experience?
Exactly.
Yeah, so SCCM does a pretty good job of reading in all the information from the manifest and pre-populating all the information it needs. You still need to browse to the file and click a couple of actions in the console. But I'm not sure if you've used the 2012 R2 stuff. It does a really, really good job of that, I think. Aside from that, we don't have too much on that end-to-end workflow. It'd be great to talk to you a little bit more about it, because sometimes I hear there's always like an extra QA step, like at least with a little bit of larger customers I talk to. So just understanding how, like a little bit more of that flow from direct compile to publish and any of the gotchas that.
Sure,
you
because
might
right
encounter.
now it still takes somebody to manually create that app package in SCCM and import the AppX and go through that manual process.
Yeah, so their SDK will still allow
Okay.
you to go do all that dynamically. So you could potentially write a script so that once it's been outputted, double click it, and if you have the right credentials, it would go and do all that magic for you. You would have to write that. There's no UI customization for that. But that's something their SDK is pretty flexible in that app model, and I know they did a lot of work around just allowing any third party to try to make customization there easier.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi. Is there a method for an enterprise to sideload a Phone 8.1 application that they got from a third party? So presumably you have a different publisher ID? Because it sounded like the cert ID had to match the AppX manifest file.
Yeah, so to install an application in any way, you have to be enrolled in that specific enterprise. If that phone is already enrolled in the other enterprise, the sideload will work just fine through email or any of the methods that are available. If they're not enrolled in that, it will fail to install. So you got basically two options. You can enroll in the enterprise, which may not be a realistic option for some of the scenarios, or you can take and you can re-sign the application to be part of that enterprise. And obviously you'd want some sort of agreement between the two organizations such that you're going to ingest it. So it'll look like it'll be that enterprise's application, not the other one.
Okay, so you can re-sign it. So if a third party sold an application, you could re-sign it with your
Yes,
enterprise
yeah, you would
fee?
re-sign it to make it look as part of your enterprise. And again, there's paper documents that should travel.
Sure, okay,
for
but you
control.
don't have to go change the manifest file for the application then? Okay, great, thanks.
I had a question about the
Sorry, one more.
side loading.
You do need to change the manifest because if it's an AppX, you need to change the manifest.
You have to rebuild the application.
Yeah.
So that's what I was trying to avoid. So if you can add that to the top of your wish list.
Okay. Will do.
Yeah, it'd be really
There's
cool
ways
if-
to programmatically do it, but it's
But it means it's not the same binary,
right.
right?
That's right. Yes, sir.
I had a question about side loading key. You mentioned that there are a couple of ways to get side loading keys for smaller enterprises, like to have 10 or batch of 10 or 100. And then for larger, it's probably just one side loading keys. I just wanted to get to the bottom of it that at the end of the day, the side loading keys can be in terms of numbers that each of them have been attached to one license, or it can be, for instance, bunch of keys that each of them have multiple licenses associated with it, different scenarios for the customers. Is that?
No, so generally when you purchase the key pack, it's just a minimum key pack. So like you can buy 10, but you can buy 20 or 30 and all attach it to the same key.
Okay.
And then likewise with, they just got announced, so I don't have all the details. With the select or the volume license agreement, it'll be the same type of thing where they'll give you a key for your enterprise, and then they'll just figure out the number of activations that you'll get. And it'll be more flexible than going and buying those key packs. And then
So when you buy those key packs, each of those keys have one activation associated with it.
it's, no,
When it comes with a batch of 10, for instance.
yeah, so the 10 pack, my understanding is you get a 10 pack and it's good for one key for 10 activations.
Oh, okay.
It's not 10 different keys. It's kind of a bad term when they call it a key pack, but it's a key with X amount of activations.
Are you sure about that? Because what we got was 100 keys that when we got one of the requests with 100, we got 100 keys. So I thought that each of those keys had one license associated with it.
The key packs that I've gotten, I can take it offline with you. I haven't seen it where they give you 100 different keys
Okay.
with an individual activation.
Okay. So probably I'll take it offline.
Yeah, I haven't seen that though.
So for the enterprise cert that expires after a year, or the token, does that mean that the apps that are on the devices stop working?
Good question. No, anything that's already been installed on the device will continue to work. In Windows Phone 8, we didn't support timestamping a signature. That was kind of a long answer. So anything that's on the device will continue to work, period. Anything that's on the store, the enterprise store, you'll need to re-sign that if they go to Windows Phone 8 clients. If they go just to Windows Phone 8.1 clients, you won't need to re-sign it. You just need to timestamp the binary. But likely you'll support both platforms, so you'll have to re-sign those applications so that when they get installed, they'll be valid.
Okay, and then when you can only have one enterprise cert on a device at a time, is that correct?
For a given enterprise?
For, well,
Or
just in general,
on the
you can't. on a phone, because you can't register to 2 organizations, correct?
There's one per dev center account
Okay.
specifically. Generally, that might follow the pattern of having one per an enterprise, or an enterprise could have multiple dev center accounts, each with their own certificate if they wanted to partition the enterprise
But
more
can
fine-grained than just having a
Can
single.
an MDM push can MDM push your current cert plus your new cert down at the same time?
I don't believe so. I believe it only pushes one cert.
So you have to have your, so how do you envision then, if my certs are going to expire next month, do I then have to upgrade everything to the new set of the new cert that is non-expired for all apps from that point going forward? Or how am I going
Yes,
to manage?
once a given app enrollment token or the cert that signs it expires, you need to renew that as well as the apps in your store. They're assigned by the now expired certificate.
Have you guys looked through the process at all of what happens when I have to redo everything for the next year with the new cert and what that looks like and how an enterprise should manage that?
Yeah, so you basically walk through the process again. If there's just one that,
I understand like the specific process, but what do I do when I have 20 apps and I'm releasing every couple, I'm releasing each one 3 times a year?
Right.
How do I actually execute that one-off process that you described in bulk to make sure that I don't invalidate some of my apps or something funny doesn't happen and I don't have a service interruption with the downstream folks on the device?
so the management server allows you to ingest a new app enrollment token that will be pushed out to phones as soon as they contact the server again. As far as going through your store, you can republish those apps that are re-signed by the new app, the new certificate.
But there's never going to be a scenario, do I have to republish, do I have to re-sign all 20 at the exact same time and then push them all back out at the exact same time for the new cert? Or can I have 2 sets of apps with 2 sets of certs in the store
No,
at
you
the same
should
time?
just have one set of apps that are all re-signed. You do them at about the same time, yes. But again, the phones that have already installed them don't need to be refreshed. They
Okay.
can get an update on whatever schedule they want, but the ones that come from the store will get the new, you probably do it about a month ahead of time or something like that before the cert expires. Anyone who installs that app will get the new certificate, and they'll be ready to go.
Is there any plan to extend the life of that certificate or anything?
That is part of the certificate management that we're looking at in future releases, yeah.
Okay, and then just to the guy who was here before me, his question, it'd be really cool if there's a way we could, as an ISV, I can sell an app and somehow not have to either A, give them my code so they can sign it, or B, have them give me their cert so they can sign it.
Yeah, the B2B scenarios are
yeah, so
that's
that'd be-
one thing.
If
Yeah.
it's on your list somewhere, that'd be great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, would there be support for a Company Hub to remove enterprise applications, not through MDM, but directly through the Company Hub APIs?
So to retrieve which one?
Would there be a Company Hub API support to remove enterprise applications? Currently, the Company Hub can enumerate and install apps, but doesn't have the ability to remove. We have the ability to remove them through MDM, but not directly through the Company Hub.
So you want to direct
You
removal?
want to uninstall applications
Yeah,
from a company
uninstall.
hub? Okay, I
To
got you.
remove package. Currently, it's only available in a debugger.
Yeah, that is also on our wish or investigation list
Okay.
for a future version.
And would that also involve store applications or just the?
That's something we have to think through because we don't want a company hub uninstalling a whole bunch of store apps that perhaps the user. Yeah, there's a difference between a bring your own device scenario and one that's an enterprise-owned scenario, and knowing the difference is challenging. Once you know that it's an enterprise-owned phone, it's likely that we will step out of the way and just allow nearly anything that can happen on the phone. For the other scenario, we want to maintain some sort of reasonable partition between what the enterprise can do and what the user thinks the enterprise should be able to do to their phone. So it's a challenge to keep those in balance.
Yeah.
We're
I
spending
understand.
a lot of time across both platforms just thinking about, like Cliff said, is it enterprise owned? Is it your own? What was the origin identity that it came from? And really trying to make sure the enterprise is in full control of what the enterprise is, and the consumer is still in full control of what's allowed for a consumer. So if an enterprise gives a little bit of space there,
Yeah.
it's not an easy problem, definitely. So it's
No.
something we want to make sure we go and get right.
I understand, but at least for enterprise apps, it would be nice if a Company Hub can
Yep.
remove them. And with respect to enumeration, would it be possible for a Company Hub to enumerate a store application? Not
That's another
uninstall,
thing
but
that we're
just to
looking at too.
enumerate.
As we move into being able to manage store applications, it makes sense for a company hub to be able to do similar things.
So for the full managed scenario, would it be possible ever to get a company hub from the public store and still have the ability to enumerate and install applications in the enterprise? Because right now, you have to have the company hub as a company hub policy through MDM.
Yeah, there should be a way
which-
to associate store apps with a given enterprise without mandating that it has to be signed by an enterprise certificate,
Yeah.
I guess. So you should be able to publish via the store and configure it just the way some enterprise apps are done today, but at the same time associate that with an enterprise so that that enterprise can, they can talk to each other and be able to see each other through some of the same mechanisms that we have.
All right. And a couple of more questions. So
Got them all buffered up.
yeah, currently for the enrollment, the user has to go through the Microsoft Workplace UI in order to get the company hub as a company policy and then allow the user to manage the apps. Would it be possible to obtain the company hub as a store certified application and still be able to kickstart the Microsoft enrollment UI and manage? Because the only way possible I can think right now is to have two different enrollment sessions, one through a public
Yep.
company hub, and then you have to instruct the user to go to the Microsoft settings UI. So the user has to go through two types
It's a good
of
question.
enrollments. Yeah.
It's an area that, again, if Catherine Holdsworth is having a session at 2:30, and she will cover some of this a little more in depth. So I suggest you attend that one and ask the same question. But they do get a lot of feedback as to either extending the inbox experience to allow more branding or more custom code to be written by the enterprise, or having a different inbox, not that inbox experience, but a different experience that allows enrollment.
Okay.
I know those are both on the consideration list for future things, but I'm not sure how those will play out.
All right. And the last thing is actually could be a bug. Maybe we can take it offline too. So just let me know. But there is a feature in the MDM protocol which is called Publisher Device ID. It's a unique combination derived from the publisher and the device. And we're experiencing issues with 8.1 emulator.
Yeah, it is a tricky issue. Let me just say that we know that we need to solve it.
Okay.
We don't have a solution that's real great.
Oh.
We're trying to avoid being able to track a specific phone by an enterprise. And again, if it's enterprise owned, we fully want to support that. But if it's the user's phone, we don't necessarily want an enterprise tracking your every movement, tracking you by a specific unique ID that can be used by in multiple interactions. So we're trying to balance those two.
Because
properly.
right now, through our tests, it shows that you get the very same value for every instance of the emulator, which contradicts the MDM protocol spec.
Right. Yeah.
So in the actual hardware devices, would they comply to the protocol spec, or would it be that it will be the same across devices?
So the one you get per publisher is unique to a given publisher. The pieces that factor into that are obviously the publisher ID as well as this unique ID that is constant to that phone. And it's likely that in the future we'll have some other notion. I don't know if it's going to be that unique device ID kind of unmasked by the publisher ID, or if there's some other mechanism. But it is something that we need to look into and handle.
Yeah, because basically what we need is, if you will, a session identifier, an enrollment session identifier. May not uniquely track the user, but something that would uniquely identify the session between the server and the client, so they can be associated as a session cookie.
Good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. It's actually related to the previous question, because we would like to achieve single sign-on between enrolling with the Microsoft UI versus enrolling with the separate app. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
So to follow up with the previous question quickly before asking my own question. So the publisher device ID is something that it is uniquely can be tracked between the MDM and the company hub application. Is that right?
For a given publisher, yeah.
For a given
works
publisher
together.
and a given device.
I'm sorry?
For a given combination of publisher and a device.
Yes, that's correct.
So that can tie these two processes to each other.
Right.
No,
And part of it's pushed down via the enrollment process. You can push down the publisher ID, and part of it is done like a company hub is.
So I had another question that maybe have been asked, and I apologize for that. So if the signing certificate for app that has been signed, if that expires, you have to renew this certificate only. Apps do not need to be touched. Is that right?
The apps that are already installed don't need to be touched because the signature is really only checked at install time.
So the moment that you update the app signing certificate, you should be good to go.
Yes, on the store. So anyone that's about to install the application for the first time we'll get the new signed version that doesn't expire for another so many months.
Of course. And if I may go back to the previous question, that publisher device ID, by the way, cannot be read from apps that are being downloaded from the store.
They'll have a different publisher ID, so they'll get a different value. That's
Got it.
correct.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, I think we'll wrap up. All done. Thank you, everyone.